What is up? What's going on, guys? It is the Mub back at it again. And in today's video, I wanted to talk about VonTooCut because he recently made a video talking about how spirituality is ultimately meaningless. And I wanted to give my 2 cents on this because, well, I agree. I'm agreeing with myself because he's just a part of me and speaking his mind. Knowing this, then that would mean that if you're mad at me or anything VonTooCut said, then ultimately you're just mad at yourself. Because if you want to learn, you got to have an open mind and you got to be willing to learn from anything and everybody, because ultimately that is you. You are everything and anybody. Now, every one of us goes through some sort of spiritual awakening, whether you're aware of it or you're not. You wouldn't know if somebody told you, some higher up told you, hey, you got to take these pills because these pills are going to make you feel better. Or you got to eat this food because this food is going to make you feel better. Or if you want to exercise, that'll make you feel better. You see, you wouldn't know because you're looking for alternatives to make you feel better. When in reality, you're going through a spiritual awakening. In my experience, for example, I was going through an awakening and I didn't want to accept that because although I knew like it was possible, I wasn't like aware consciously. I wasn't at that level yet where I could even consider spirituality as something legitimate. But when you look into it a little bit and you follow it and you do the work and you're working your way up and you want to reach God level, right? You ultimately just end up in the same place you were at. I'm speaking from personal experience, whether you are a light worker, a dark worker, if you're a worker, in period, it don't matter. You are you and nothing's gonna change. So that's what VonTooCut meant. People like to take what this man said and sum up their own negative way of looking at it and whatnot. This man was just being real. He was telling y'all that, hey, this life really don't matter, but that don't mean that you shouldn't try because you're in it. You're not getting out. You're in the hamster wheel. You're going to keep running. A lot of us want to stop feeling certain things. We want to be numb. We don't want to feel this, that, and the third, but we have to because we live in, we alive, that's life, and the only time you get to rest is when you're sleeping. What does that mean? When you dead. And when you dead, it don't even mean that you dead for long, because you gonna come back on the day you died is the day you born. And we can look at it like that, because that is part of life. But then you also got joy, happiness, peace, tranquility. You got all the other stuff, all the positive feelings, right? You got positive and negative feelings. That is life. That it just it is. There's no escaping it. And the reason behind why somebody would want to escape that spiritual process, that spiritual awakening, that's the whole reason why anybody would embark on that journey. Even though you would think it's a choice, but it's really not, because everybody goes through it, whether you want to disguise it as, I'm just bipolar, or in your next life you're just extremely overweight because you eat because you didn't want to go through that spiritual journey. I mean, everybody got a spiritual journey, because I am literally no different than you are, just in terms of mindset and personality. There's really nothing else that's different from you and me except the ego. And the ego has a lot of people confused, and the ego wants to believe that it knows it all and knows everything, right? Part of the spiritual awakening and the spiritual journey is learning how to detach, learning how to let go of a lot of ego material things that you possess or that you might be attached to, but then later realizing you never really let go of anything because you're still on planet Earth and you're still in that body that you so desperately tried to get out of. Now, a lot of people might say, well, VonTooCut, that's just his ego speaking. Yes and no. See, your ego, whether, it's a very high ego or it's not a high ego, it doesn't matter, because if you're aware of this information, whether or not you got a high ego or not, it's going to be presented the same way. We live with the ego, so we must adapt and change with the ego. The ego is a part of us. That's what differentiates everything and everybody, is ego. Now, when you got a lot of uninformed egos out there, ego just likes to attack and make themselves seem somewhat better than that other person, when in reality, we're no different from each other. Nobody's better than anybody else, but the ego believes it is. So the ego is going to attack and is going to put down anything that doesn't resonate with that ego if it's not informed. You feel me? If we didn't have individuals that could think past the ego, right, you wouldn't have people like VonTooCut coming out and saying what he's saying, because he'll get attacked. All these YouTubers, reaction channels and whatnot, all these people that are giving this man a lot of hate and looking down on him and whatnot, just haven't realized that they're not ready for that information. They're not. And a lot of the people that followed VonTooCut on his journey were following that spiritual awakening journey with him. They weren't following it because he was telling them to follow that journey. They were following that journey because they were following it with him. See, he just decided to speak his mind about how he looks at things now. But of course, everything's being flipped sideways because, well, he had a lot of people watching him, and they, for some reason, can't look up information past what he was already telling them. So that's not his fault. You know what I mean? You gotta be somewhat. There's levels to this shit. There really is, and a lot of you guys aren't ready for it.